Welcome to Screen Quest, a podcast where a fellowship of film lovers and armchair movie experts plays film roulette. I'm one of your hosts, Chris Waterman from Jacksonville, joined this evening by May Finch. Also,
hi everyone.
And we have Will Rotondi from Greenville, South Carolina. What's up, Will?
Hey, what's going on, man?
I'm going to apologize at the top of the hour, or the top of the episode, I should say. For my croaky voice, I picked up a little bug on my travels abroad, so I apologize in advance for my sniffly, croaky voice. Hopefully it'll be better by next episode. On today's episode, we are going to be talking about Blade Runner and how it compares to its source material, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? We'll also draw a side quest and play a little game at the end of the episode. But first, my lovely co-host Will has a word of the show for you. So Will, take it away.
Sounds good. So in honor of Blade Runner and the fact that it very much likes to emulate a lot of classic film noir in its telling as sort of a detective story, it reminded me of a lot of the chiaroscuro, which is an Italian term for light dark, it became prominent back in early paintings by Da Vinci and Caravaggio and got adapted into film as a way of showing very definitive sorts of cuts between light and dark in scene setup, in terms of the mise en scène that you see, in terms of like whenever you've watched an old black and white film noir where somebody's walking down a dark alley and there's certain cuts of light in a specific angle, or you have somebody's face is partially obscured halfway and you see maybe their eyes through blinds. That's often a tool that's used a lot. And so you see that emulated here or used as well in Blade Runner, whether it's Deckard's apartment through the blinds that he's got set up, or just simply when he's out walking around the city, because there is so much going on in terms of light and dark, in terms of advertisements with neon signs or dark alleyways, or just the general sort of smoky, smoggy environment that he's walking through.
Definitely gives it that film noir mood, along with, of course, the lovely saxophone and that Vangelis soundtrack at certain key points, or synthesizer, which kind of stands in sometimes for when there's not actual saxophone. But yeah, that's really cool. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons I fell in love with this movie, was like that it felt so authentic, like to like the noir like genre. And it was blending something, mind you, I was probably, I don't know, 12 or 13, I think, the first time I saw this. And it was the director's cut I got from the local library. And yeah, I was just very impressed with, like, this was something familiar, but very different, and that, like, I'd seen film noir movies before because my grandmother loved some of those old, like, Bogart, Sam Spade, that kind of stuff, and
Maltese Falcon. Yeah,
absolutely. So it was recognizable, but it was also wholly different. So but I think like why it's successful is because of the techniques like that and some of those elements. So very cool, man. I think that's a great pick for the word of the show. Topical, you might say.
Thank you. And so, even for the lighting that we have, we purposely filmed this at night so that there'd be
100%. Yes, we've been talking about it all week. We have not. Just a happy accident. But amazing. Well, thank you so much, Will, for that word of the show. Let's go ahead and give our side quest a little shuffle and see if we can't draw a tasty card here. So let's see. Ooh, here we go. It is a diamond in the rough. So this is where we will, one of us will put forth a film that we think doesn't necessarily get the love it deserves, maybe underrated, under talked about, underappreciated. Anybody have a selection for this one?
I do.
Excellent.
I have a selection. So it's I only laugh because I've been thinking about this film a lot, and I thought about it after I went to go see Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be a tie-in for something else very tangential. But there is a film that came out, and I'll have to look up what it was. I should have known that part beforehand. But there is a film called Life as a House that has Kevin Kline and Jenna Malone, actually, who was Ellie Arroway, young Ellie in Contact that we watched recently. Kristen Scott Thomas, Mary Steenburgen, who I guess the most recognizable for me for her was when she was in Back to the Future Part 3. It also stars Hayden Christensen, which, I mean, Star Wars is going to be the only thing I think anybody thinks of for Darth Vader for him. But actually not, I would say he gets a lot of negative publicity for his acting in Star Wars, but I actually thought he was pretty decent in Life as a House. That all being said, the film is about this aging man played by Kevin Kline who finds out that he's got terminal cancer, and he is trying to reconnect with his family, his estranged family. He's divorced. He's estranged from his son, played by Hayden Christensen. And he quits his job, and he's just trying to reconnect with everybody back home, or where was home for him at one point. And he is doing that as well by going back and reconstructing this house and trying to enlist his estranged family to kind of help him with that and reconnect with them. And some of it's very strange. There's a lot of weird interplay with some of the characters, but I think what really struck me, and I watched this film back in high school, and at the time I was going through a lot of depression. And so I think that, to me, watching this film about, which I thought was so beautiful in its grief, in its depiction of grief, I found very cathartic, just between Kevin Kline and mostly Kevin Kline and his wife, but also his son. And there were just some scenes, man, that really got, I mean, like I don't usually cry in a movie, but there are two films that I will cry in. It's that one, and it's Everything Everywhere All at Once. And there's something about it that just gets to me. And it's not in a negative way. It's just something that's very cathartic that helps me sort of work through a lot of feelings that I had when I was a teenager. So that's pretty much all I've got on that front there.
On the opposite, I will cry at like a lot of stuff, man. Like there are movies that will make me cry. That like I've seen them, it doesn't matter, like 100 times, and like still like I'll start crying in anticipation of crying because I'm like, no, it's coming. So
yeah. Oh man. Yeah.
You must be a sucker for Pixar films.
Oh man. Oh,
yeah,
that's true too. Up. Oh god.
Toy Story 3 baby too, like at the end of that.
Oh.
Yeah.
Like at the very end.
The very end. Yeah.
Like when they almost thought they were gonna die, or
no, not even that.
Give
like,
it away.
Spoiler alert. Well,
more
I'm
like
sorry
when,
for
like,
people who haven't watched Toy Story 3 yet.
No, it's like when Andy's saying goodbye and like giving the toys away. That bit is what really gets me. But
oh yeah.
I will have to check this out, man. Is there so I know you talked about how you know, obviously like you connected with it. Is there I don't know, I was gonna ask, I lost my train of thought. A particular aspect of it that you think is underrated? Is it like the performances, like the story, or do you think it's just like a complete package that just went under the radar?
I think it just sort of flew under the radar, or maybe it was where I was at the time when I actually watched it. Maybe it was just something I wasn't aware of, because I know there's certain films that they come out and I've had no clue that they were going to be out at all. And I watched it just because I saw the cover, or I saw a blip about it, and I thought, yeah, I want to see that. So I think it was mostly that. I could have just been oblivious at the time. But I feel like generally, whenever I've talked to anybody, no one has seen that film. So I'm actually really stoked that your wife has seen that. Like, that is awesome.
Yeah, no, it's one of, like, she brings it up like all the time whenever I'm watching, inevitably, like the prequel trilogy.
Yeah,
she'll shake her head and be like, I still can't believe this is the fucking guy from Life as a House. I'm like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it, but cool.
I really
man.
want to see it now, because you compared it to Everything Everywhere All at Once, which, oh, that film got me. I think I like was laughing and crying at the same time somehow. I didn't think that was biologically possible, but I guess it is.
Yeah.
And if they're similar, I know for me, with Everything Everywhere All at Once, there's just like this thread of like very unusual emotional honesty kind of underlaying all the absurdity and comedy and action. that is, I think, what got those emotions out of me. So I would be very interesting to see if Life as a House is similar.
I'm quite upset that I did not get to see everything everywhere all at once this week because I was sick. So as soon as I feel better, I'm going to make it. Like I looked all over. I was going to see it in the UK. I was going to spend 2 hours of an evening on an international trip to go see it because that's how badly I want to see it. But it wasn't playing in any of the cinemas. So
go see it at Sunray. That's what I did.
It moved to the drive-in, and I just don't know if it would be a good drive-in movie. You know what I mean? Like that seems like one I want to be kind of like close to other people like experiencing it. So but I'm going to go see The Northman at Sunray, which looks incredible, but I digress. All right. Well, anything you'd like to add about Life as a House?
No, nothing without giving away plot points. So I'll try not to, since I've destroyed everyone's heart over Toy Story. I will hold back.
Yeah. You sold me. I mean, if that helps, so yeah. I want to, I mean, I've wanted to see it anyway, but like you've kind of renewed my interest in it. Maybe I'll watch it this weekend while I'm not feeling well.
I think it is. I think it's Kevin Kline and it's Christian Scott Thomas, man. They're just, they're so good. They're so good. I'm sorry. That's just,
I like Mary Steenburgen. She's really, really she's, I think like an underrated actress. Like she's been in a lot of things that I actually quite enjoy.
Yeah. She's typical quirky, her characters usually are as sort of the typecast, but yeah, she's a little bit different. She's not nearly as like, I don't know, like her characters typically are, I would say, wholesome and also very conservative, typically, from what I've seen. And her character in this is not entirely. So that was a nice sort of little surprise quirkiness to it. But that's all I'll say about that.
Fantastic. All right. Well, we'll report back, like May and I, if we end up watching this. I feel like we should circle back at some point when we have one of these cards, especially to see if the other hosts agree. So thanks for sharing, man.
My pleasure.
That brings us to our main quest. And as I said, we're going to be talking about Blade Runner and Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? And specifically, was the book better? Will, since this is your card and your nomination, I'm going to let you guide us through the discussion. So take it away, my friend.
Thank you. So I guess we'll start with the fact that Blade Runner premiered back in 1982. It was directed by Ridley Scott, and it has since then gone through several iterations of being re-released, similar to Star Wars in that it has different cuts that have come out over the years. We had the director's cut back in 92, and then we had the final cut released in 2007. So depending on which version that you may have watched, and I will speak for my co-hosts in that we did not all watch the same version, which is okay, because that way you get sort of an interesting evolution of what this film was and where it ended up for the final version, along with comparing it to the book. And again, it's directed by Ridley Scott. It stars Harrison Ford, Sean Young, Rutger Hauer, Edward James Olmos, and Daryl Hannah. And for those listeners who may have been watching these films as we have, in the order that we have, it's worth noting that Blade Runner also stars M. Emmett Walsh, who you may remember as the groundskeeper in Knives Out. And here he plays Police Captain Bryant. Fun little bit of trivia as well, in case you have watched the sequel, Blade Runner 2049, Ana de Armas, who's also in Knives Out and plays Marta, shows up as well there. But back to the original Blade Runner. The film's title refers to the name given to members of a special arm of the police force charged with finding, identifying, and terminating, or as they call it, retiring, sentient robots known as replicants. And this is because replicants are deemed illegal on Earth following an uprising at an off-world colony. As Chris mentioned, this is based on the book by Philip K. Dick, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? And we will certainly circle back to why there's such a difference in the titles. There's some interesting trivia about the evolution and how Blade Runner became the name for the film, along with all the other changes that I'm sure we're going to talk about here soon. In the film itself, Harrison Ford portrays Rick Deckard, who is a Blade Runner tasked with finding and retiring 4 replicants who have recently arrived on Earth. And they've come in spite of the danger to themselves because, as we learn, They each only have a 4-year lifespan, and they're seeking out their creator to learn whether there's any way they can extend it. I will say that while Blade Runner is set in 2019, the book itself takes place on January 3rd of 2021. And I mention those dates for a couple of reasons. First, it skips 2020 completely, and I think we can all agree that's a good thing. On top of that, I actually picked up a copy of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep for the first time to read it on January 3rd of this year, which I thought was kind of trippy that it was 1 year off. On a final note for the film, it's one of many that popularized the depiction of that more dystopian cityscape. So that sprawling concrete jungle of industrial centers and towering apartment buildings, old and new architecture, multicultural communities, the massive digital advertisements, interactive advertisements, and lots of, as we talked about earlier, chiaroscuro, which was very popular back with old film noir. So with all of that lovely information in mind, I'd like to start by hearing from both of you. This could be specifics, items that you found interesting between the book and the film. If you'd like me to go ahead and throw out a couple of ideas, we can, but more just kind of your general vibe of what you found most striking between the book and the film.
In terms of like differences, I'm assuming you mean, or
yeah, I guess the most striking difference for you between the book and the film. And I think, May, this was your first time watching it. So I'd actually be interested to hear from you first, just in terms of what you found to be the most, especially as well, because you watched the original version. So you got the initial voiceover and all that interesting.
I did not understand the assignment, listeners.
I think you took the assignment and you made it even better. I'm going to go with that because I actually think that gives us a more rounded picture, but I am very happy to hear.
That's generous of you, Will. My first thought is that there were not enough blades in a movie called Blade Runner. Lots of running, not enough blades. I'm sure you'll go into the name later, but that was kind of the first funny thing that hit me. I want to get like deeper into this later, but I feel like there were some very small changes made between the book and the movie for the most part. But it felt like there was a very big change just in kind of like, I guess like the final message or the overall, how does the world, but also how does Rick Deckard feel about these replicants or Andys? Because it feels like they are portrayed more with more empathy in the movie than the book, I would say. But I also feel like it comes across as a more like tight-knit story in the book than in the movie. So I don't know. I feel conflicted on how I feel between the two, and I want to hear from you and Chris.
Well, that's a good point. And yeah, Chris, especially since you've seen all pretty much every version of the film, you've read the book, I think, a couple of times. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
I think the book is lacking almost entirely of likable characters. That was like one of the first things that like struck me. Definitely the most of the androids are far more sinister, I think, than they come across. Roy Batty notwithstanding, like Rutger Hauer, I think one of the brilliant things about that performance is that you see him be quite brutal in the early moments of the film, and then as you get towards the end and he gets closer to his inevitable demise, he softens around the edges, and then you realize that a lot of the things that he's been doing is sort of out of fear and frustration and kind of being fed up with how he's been treated. But that would say that was the biggest striking difference for me. It was just like I didn't particularly like the opening of that book, man. I really liked sort of like I was touched by the discussions around like the animals and sort of the shame around mechanical animals, which is a big thing that features in the book. And it's almost like a little nod in the owl in the film, the comment about the artificial owl. And then we really never see that again in the movie. But I thought that was a really cool aspect of the book. But that's pretty much where the likability of Deckard in the book kind of like started and stopped for me. I found him to be kind of an asshole in just a lot of different ways. But So yeah, that's my quick little take as far as like differences. I do want to talk about the animals in the book as like, you know, kind of part of our discussion, but yeah.
Chris, you reminded me that I was actually very upset that they cut Erin's character in the movie. I
Oh,
loved
yeah.
her.
The wife, yes. She's one of the few people I genuinely like had like a ton of sympathy for.
Yeah.
You know, just anytime we encountered her, right? Like, but
it's true. And especially since she's tied in very much to the religion that's in the book, or she's sort of the gateway to learning about that, with the empathy boxes that the characters refer to, which is where they can connect into sort of this collective consciousness and experience this cathartic, struggle that's sort of visualized for them as this guy named, I think it's Wilbur Mercer, who's trying to climb up this mountain and ends up getting rocks thrown at him by unseen forces, and it may fall a few times. And it's almost sort of like a version of the Matrix for them, because not only do they feel it, but they can be physically harmed by it. And it sort of comes away as this is their way of sort of feeling some kind of emotion, because it's like in the future in the book, everyone struggles to really feel anything anymore. They have these other devices they can use to decide, okay, I want to feel depression for a little while, so I'm going to plug that in, and that's what it's going to feed into my, I guess, the right chemicals to make me feel that way. Or I want to be happy, or I want to be, like they choose the emotions they want just based on what they think is what's on the menu for the day. It's interesting. So to
like
have
the
that
lasting satisfaction of a day well done or some shit at the end, like that killed me.
Yeah.
I was like, that's so
they also
specific.
had like unquestionable faith in like your husband's choices or something like that.
I know.
Oh my God,
or like when
yeah.
he tried to manipulate his wife's stuff. Yeah, like I'm just gonna plug this in and make her feel, yeah, like they were gonna get back at each other that way. It's sort of
It
like
was
a way of
overdone
manipulation.
enough. I thought it was hilarious personally, but
Yeah. It was definitely funny. I feel like there was a makeup sex setting too. They're like, let's go ahead and like, dial this in so like we can, go make love and like feel connected again. And I'm like, that's funny. There's a makeup sex setting. That's great.
Solid. Well, I mean, we could talk about Philip K. Dick and his interesting real life versus the book, if that's a segue, or we could possibly just not even worry about that entirely. That is up to you. But I found that interesting when May brought that up, because learning more about him, it's sort of like the whole thing when you learn about the people that have created these, these interesting works of art, and then you find out about what their home life was like, and you're like, I guess that explains a lot, but also that guy might have needed to go to jail.
Yeah, it's like I've come to understand whenever I'm looking at a film or a book that there's two main sources of inspiration people tend to draw from when they're writing. One is their own life experiences, and one is the work of the people around them. And a lot of like my favorite writers will be kind of in conversation with other contemporary writers or past writers in their genre. And whenever I see something that just seems very out of place is usually when I'll go and look up the author's autobiography, because I'm like, I want to see where this came from. Yep. And yeah, with Philip K. Dick, he writes women in a very specific way. And if you look at his relationship history, he actually he had many wives, and one of them he like tried to run her off of a cliff in a car. I think he actually did that. There were 2 car related incidents with 2 different wives. And then another one he tried to he did commit her to a psychiatric facility involuntarily, briefly. And to me, that is important to know as I'm reading kind of like Deckard's relationship with Erin, but also Rachel, and especially that really weird scene when they're in the car and he suddenly decides to he's going to kill Rachel, but he's not going to kill Rachel and stuff like that. Anyway, it's an interesting lens to have that information.
Yeah, I hope somebody makes a biopic about him someday. I said in our group chat, and like people would think that a lot of the stuff that happened around him, to him, by him, like actions taken by him, would probably be exaggerated. Like,
He was very involved with the FBI as well for some reason.
He took a lot of drugs. He had psychotic breaks. If you really want to go down the rabbit hole, I think it's called the Exegesis, his big long like manifesto where supposedly he was visited by transdimensional beings and like it's all about like how the universe like works and all that stuff. He's an interesting chap, we'll put it that way.
So where's his religion? I mean, L. Ron Hubbard did like something like that. Where's the Scientology knockoff from?
I could be wrong.
Maybe they could take that.
I do know he was very good friends with Robert Heinlein, who was like polar opposite on like the political spectrum and sort of lifestyle spectrum, and frequently loaned him money to kind of keep him like off the streets. Heinlein was like a former Marine and like was very like kind of like straight lace, compared to OK Dick, although most people probably would seem that way. But
yeah, he was the guy who wrote Starship Troopers, right?
Yeah, and Stranger in a Strange Land, which are both great.
Ooh, yeah, that would actually be a good follow-up episode to talk about Starship Troopers versus I'm glad you mentioned that. Actually, I will take a note.
Paul Verhoeven, baby. If I haven't put any of his films on the list, and I don't think I did, I feel like I fucked up, but I digress. Nice. So yeah, we'll continue. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to derail that with Philip.
You're not derailing the train. You're not driving us off the cliff, my friend. You're good. So to go back a little bit, let's talk about the animals, because that is also a very important part in the book, since in the future animals are a status symbol because there's not a lot of them anymore. And that's sort of depicted well in the film to the extent that there's not a lot of anything living besides humans. And even then, arguably not very well. In the film, the replicants often seem to be the ones with the most emotion, or at least the most emotional range, and the ones that seem to be the most interested in actually living or doing anything besides everybody else who just kind of seems like they're going through the motions as cogs in the machine. But the animals in the book are a status symbol of wealth, because if you have something that's real, then you're considered very wealthy. In the future, in the book, a lot of people have traveled off world because there's been a war, there's nuclear fallout. If you were still on Earth, you run the risk of becoming what they would call special, which is you have had some sort of physical ailment due to that radioactive fallout. So your cognitive abilities may be hampered, or you may simply just be looked at as sort of a lower class in society, unfortunately. And so there's that sort of conflict. And then kind of going back to the status symbol of the animals and back to the title of it, a lot of the animals that are there in the book are all purchased and fake. So much like the replicants, there's always the question of, is this real or is this not real? And is having something that's fake good enough to pass off as a status symbol, or how does that sort of affects how the characters feel about themselves and how they feel about their reputations with each other. In the film, you do see some animals that are there. There's a python, I think, or some sort of large snake that's in one scene that Deckard, when he's going after one replicant, comes across. There's the owl that Chris talked about when he goes to see Terrell at the corporation at the very beginning. The owl even is, I think, in the book as well, is an important comment about how that would be a lot of money if it's real, and how much like John Hammond in Jurassic Park, money is no expense for Terrell. So, but I guess the other part, and just going back and watching it again for me, that I thought was interesting was one of the characters, and I always get them confused between the book and the film, but I want to say it's J.F. Sebastian, who plays one of the I would say one of the only characters that is friendly towards replicants. Has a chess set that he plays with Terrell, and the chess set that J.F. Sebastian has is comprised of a bunch of different animals, and the one that Terrell has is more of the classic style of chess. So that, to me, I thought was interesting to see that little bit of symbolism in there. But for both of you, what were your takeaways about this sort of the importance of animals and the real versus not real, and how that played into the story?
I didn't even notice that about the chess set, so thank you for pointing that out. I'm leaning on the book a bit here just because I watched the original film first, then 2049, and then I read the book. So it's top of mind. And the character that Sebastian's taken from, I'm blanking on his name actually.
It's J.R. It starts with
Isidore.
It's
Isidore. Yeah,
Isidore.
Isidore. Thank you. So Isidore is actually like a mechanical animal technician, basically like a vet for the mechanical pets.
Yeah.
And he's still a special in the book and in the film in different ways. But he's definitely shown as being kind of like the peak of empathy in the book. And I think that is very true in the film as well, in terms of like the fact that he's, very empathetic with all forms of life, whether they're mechanical or physical. And in the film, that makes a lot of sense because he works with the Tyrell Corporation, with Tyrell directly, and has a hand in all of these mechanical brains, essentially. And yeah, I think this is where I wish the film had done a bit more with Mercerism, or at least that idea of empathy, because with the very limited like version of animals that we get in the film, it's like not super clear that they are like status wise like way above any kind of like mechanical animal, but also mechanical human. Like replicants are down here, subway rat is up here in terms of who the humans will empathize with and value. Which is an interesting inversion. Says a lot about the society. And I feel like that just didn't come across like very clearly in the movie. And they're definitely seen as a status symbol, but I think that oftentimes mechanical versions of the animals, sometimes they're passed off as status symbols, but I think a lot of the time it's just because like the person's lonely. And they're fulfilling that more direct empathic need and role of just being a companion.
It's sort of, I don't know, is it far-fetched to say that especially for the Rick Deckard police officer, since he's not technically, they never use the term Blade Runner in the book, and we can tie back to that later about the difference, but it's an interesting point that for him, it's like having that pet or having, the animal for him and his wife is sort of, it's something that he gets really excited about. Like they both sort of feel like this fills a void for them. And so it's interesting to see that that's because it seems like they're very unhappy with each other. Otherwise, they're just antagonistic to each other. And even the Rick Deckard in the book is very easy to even consider going out and just having a one-night fling with a replicant, because he doesn't see that there's any sort of law that he's breaking in that, because she's not real. And so I don't know, it's like the animals sort of represent some sort of tie into, I don't necessarily want to say it's like feeling like if you're having a kid that's going to make your relationship better, or maybe it's just sort of a tie back to what's real, trying to feel something that's more real than just everything that's fake around them.
It's funny, good that you say that, because that's exactly what I like when I was reading that I was thinking. I'm like, oh, this is like people that are having tremendous issues in a relationship and think that having a child is going to make things better. That's exactly what I thought when I was reading it. So I love, this is my favorite aspect of the books, and the thing I think the movie's like missing the most. Like I think it's one of the best like ideas left on the table, so to speak, besides the religion, specifically because I love all the detail, like just the etiquette of it. Like it's rude to ask somebody if it's real or fake, for example. The fact that to spare you the shame of a mechanical breakdown, the engineers are dressed like animal vets and show up in like cars that like kind of maintain that illusion that like maybe it is like real. And there's an interesting thing that happens in the book where that sort of confusion leads to the death of a real animal, right? With Isidore, where he thinks it's a mechanical cat and he's trying to fix it the way that you would fix a mechanical cat. It turns out it's a real cat. But yeah, it was one of my favorite aspects for sure. And Yeah, they allude to a little bit like the taboo of like with some of the Voight-Kampff questions in the film, like the talking about the entree consisting of boiled dog, killing the wasp, and some of the other stuff. Like a lot of those questions are very much geared around the animals, but it's not it's very much contextual, where like you have to kind of like, I think I had watched the film a few times before I read the book. Like it took me 3 or 4 viewings before I really picked up on the fact that like, oh, this is the reason that this is part of the empathy test is because of like the status that these animals hold. Like, and I just figured like, oh, most of them are probably just wiped out because of all the pollution and stuff, right? Like I just didn't really make the clear connection. So
it was the same for me too. Having watched the film and having no idea where these questions were coming from, and then actually reading the book and realizing how much of a big deal that was. And I thought, well, it's a nice reference, but I feel like they could have like pushed it a little bit extra there to give you some context to it in the film. But oh well.
Question for May. Does the narration, because like I've only seen the theatrical cut once, which was enough for me. Do they explain that at all? Because I know like there's a lot of exposition like in the narration, which was put in because the test reactions were very poor without it, and the studio said people aren't going to understand what the fuck's going on if Harrison Ford doesn't explain it to them. So
honestly, I'm pissed I watched the thematic first, because there was a throw my popcorn moment every time I heard his voice come on for a voiceover. He sounds like he's falling asleep. It's so bad. It's like, wait, Harrison Ford is bored with his own movie?
Like, the rumor is he threw it because he thought if I do a bad enough job, like they won't put it in, because he didn't want to do it. Like he thought it was a stupid idea. So
it was. Harrison Ford was right. Anyway, no, they did not explain the Voight-Kampff test. That's also something that like I figured out later. It was really pointless voiceover in general. It like was sometimes expository, but oftentimes it would just be showing obvious emotions. Like,
yep.
I wrote down the worst example as I was watching, which was as Batty is dying.
Oh, I remember this.
The voiceover kicks in and says, "All I could do was sit there and watch him die. He was just trying to kill Batty like 2 seconds earlier." And then that voiceover comes.
Yep.
Oh, I can't. Sorry. Anyway, no, the voiceover was not helpful.
Hopefully someday you'll rewatch this, and I do urge you to watch the final cut because it is a very different atmosphere. It really lets you absorb it.
Yeah, I did go watch the scenes that they'd added in the final cut just to make sure I'd like seen them, but I will do the full rewatch at some point.
Yeah. So there is an animal in the film that does not feature in the book that's quite important.
Yes, at the very end.
Speaking of which, well, at the end, and then like there's a bit in the middle that kind of like ties that together, and that's a unicorn. So let me ask you: is the eternal question somewhere in your agenda? Will, if it is, I'll leave it for now. But like, as far as where you come down on Deckard in the film, is that, do you have that on the?
That is absolutely
okay,
that is on the. In fact, we can talk about that right now, because you make a good point. So there's 2 animals and these sort of tie together in the same sort of relative same sequence. We have a dove that's symbolic at the end of the film with Roy, and then we also have the unicorn that Chris mentioned, which is part of an added scene back in for the final cut that has a great deal of significance in that version, and has been a question that I guess technically the director has answered at this point, but that was sort of an argument back and forth for fans of Blade Runner for a long time, which is the question of, is Rick Deckard also a replicant? Is he going after people? Is that the reason why Roy doesn't kill him at the end? Is that also the reason why Rick is kind of struggling as well in what he's dealing with throughout the film? But also, more importantly, the fact that there is another character played by Edward James Olmos, who's a fellow detective who kind of is just sort of shadowing him on and off throughout the film and pestering him whenever it's time to go see the police captain. That is also making little origami characters or origami animals. And I'm trying to remember the order that they come out on, but the last one that he makes is a unicorn and leaves it outside of Deckard's apartment. And so as Deckard and Rachel are leaving and trying to escape from the authorities, there's that question of, did Gaff, I believe is the name of the character of the detective, was he aware that Deckard was a replicant? Is this an implanted memory that Deckard has? Because he has this dream sequence of seeing this unicorn partway through the film. So yeah, but there's a couple other scenes too that might allude to Deckard being a replicant, and we can go ahead and talk about that. And Chris, if you'd like to, I would say go for it if you want to take it away on that point.
Yeah, I mean, so I come down firmly on that he is. Now, whether or not that's the more interesting choice, I think is a different discussion, but they added sort of that glare in his eyes to really drive the point home in the final cut. So like all the replicants and artificial things have this like signature kind of shine or twinkle that shows up. Oh, I can't read, my eyes are piss poor. I'm sorry, May. What does your board say?
Sorry, trivia board moment. So my question is actually very relevant. It says, in the first Blade Runner, the Schuftan process made the replicant's eyes glow. True or false?
I don't know what that is, so that's going to be a total guess for me. I'm going to say true.
What about you, Will?
I'm going to be different. I'm going to say false, so that at least one of us gets it right, but I don't know what the Schuftan process is either.
It is true. It's a process that's kind of outdated now. I think the last time it was used was in the first Lord of the Rings.
Nice.
It involves, so at least in this use case in Blade Runner, basically light is bounced into the actor's and actress's eyes off of a piece of a half mirrored glass mounted at a 45-degree angle to the camera, and allows them to do like a little bit of reflection special effects work.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Anyway, so the glowing eyes, Chris.
Yes.
I love it, man. This is why I podcast with you all. Like, it just all comes together. It's like peanut butter and jelly. Yeah, but I think he is. I mean, I think there's evidence like the fact that he's got a handler, and then if you consider like how the sequel kind of like where the world is, like I think he's the prototype of what the Ryan Gosling character of K kind of like becomes, right? They realize that the best Blade Runners are replicants, right? Especially if you can make them obey. So I think he's like the first replicant without a lifespan. Again, I think it's a different discussion if that's the better choice or the more interesting choice, but that's my take. The unicorn.
How about you, man? Sorry. Yeah, I was gonna say when they threw that in there. How about you, May? What are your thoughts on that?
I kind of don't. So I don't like the idea of him being a replicant as well, and I don't see the unicorn as strong evidence that he is, just because there's a lot of other explanations potentially for the unicorn. I mean, it's been a classic symbol of kind of like your peak mysterious, magical, mythological animal, and in a society that basically worships animals, it makes sense for that to be seen as like a popular symbol. And when I first watched it, before I looked up those fan theories, I thought, it was Gaff kind of like giving his blessing, I guess, to him running off with Rachel, as being like either she's a unicorn or like you're a unicorn, and in that, this is a special circumstance, essentially. And like with the director's cut, with him having that dream, it felt like just kind of dashed in after the fact to me. So I'm just going to ignore it because I saw the theatrical cut.
Nice.
That's right. There are plenty of like hardcore Blade Runner fans that do, right? Frank Darabont, the guy that directed, Shawshank Redemption and like was the showrunner for the first season of Walking Dead, like famously like refuses to like accept or like entertain the possibility because he thinks it's a far more beautiful story if Deckard's human.
Yeah. And like I don't know how to like necessarily score that with 2049, because I think K would have happened eventually regardless, just because they kept making replicants better, and eventually human like Blade Runners wouldn't be able to keep up just because they were so powerful. So it makes sense that they would start employing other replicants. But like the whole plot with Rachel and Deckard and their kid in 2049, Yeah, I don't know how it quite squares with that, because also I think their love story is not exactly a love story. And I don't know what was so unique about it that it was able to produce a kid between the two of them. But I feel like if it was as simple as like mating two replicants, like they definitely had tried that in some lab before.
Yeah.
Well, they
It's
make the
valid.
comment too, like in 2049, that it's Tyrell's like final joke, right? Like that he made it so that a replicant could, you know, reproduce, but like didn't tell anybody about it, right? Like it was like a private thing. So
I have a counter theory. I think that's false.
you think it's false?
I think that's false, because the only reason they know that Rachel died in childbirth is because they make this comment about her like birth canal being too small.
Right.
She was built. She was built to die in childbirth, essentially.
Oh, interesting.
So I don't think it was intentional at all by Tyrell, personally.
Huh. Interesting.
That's a good point. Yeah.
How about you, Will?
Things to go back on and reflect on when we talk about 2049 more fully. Yeah. Oh, but back to Deckard. I could see it either way, but I have to go with I feel like just watching the changes that they made to the final cut, my gut is to go with go with the idea that he is a replicant. And I think because of the glowy eyes, and it's the camera trickery. It's what gets me. It's the conspiracy theorist in me, I guess. But I feel like it was that, and it was the dream sequence, just going off of what was added back in. I mean, but I'll play devil's advocate and think that, you know, with how the animals are such a status symbol, and also the fact that there's so many advertisements everywhere you go, that I could see it's conceivable that, hey, he watched an advertisement that had a unicorn, and for some reason everybody's just thinking about unicorns right now. So it could all just be subliminal. So.
Yeah, the other reason that I don't like the idea of Deckard being a replicant is I feel like it was partly added in to make the scene where he comes onto Rachel more comfortable, because you can kind of excuse his behavior as a replicant as, oh, he doesn't know how to like respectfully court a woman or whatever.
Are you telling me that that wasn't appropriate behavior? Every time I see that, I'm like, fuck, I forgot about this.
It's like, so cringy.
Yeah, it gets rapey real fast.
It does.
It does get rapey. Yeah.
Anyway, then I feel like after, you know, it going through multiple audiences in time, it was easier just to kind of like imply he's a replicant and doesn't like know stuff. Whereas I think like Deckard is intentionally an extremely unlikable person, and I'd rather him just be a shitty human than just an awkward replicant in that moment.
Agreed. Kind of like he is in the book. Just make him that shitty character from the book and we're good.
Yeah, I forgot he was like, you know, as I'm like, because I've only read the book once in college. So I was like, wow, I'm like, this obviously didn't stick in a way that I feel like it should have. You know, like this made quite the impression on the second read. Like I was genuinely getting pissed off on the plane I was reading. I'm like, how am I going to get through 200 pages of this? Like, and then when I realized that they kind of switched perspectives a little bit in the book here and there, I was like, all right, well, this is making it more tolerable. But
yeah, that's true. I think one of the other interesting differences too is not only, and this can sort of, I guess, continue on into the replicant side of the house versus the shitty humans, is that in the books, the replicants are less, I mean, the whole, I guess, message, if we want to try and simplify it for the book in some ways, is that it's all about what makes you real, what makes you human versus a replicant. And empathy seems to be like hammered on you all the time as the defining trait of, if you're empathetic, if you can feel for something else, then you're a human. But a replicant doesn't have empathy. A replicant doesn't care if you pull the legs off of a spider or if you are it doesn't click for them. So that's why the Voight comp test works, is they don't see the significance of being empathetic to other creatures, or just the decisions that they make, like Chris was talking about how they're a lot more sort of just emotionless and ruthless, or just they don't really care about anybody around them. probably also arguably makes sense since everybody seems to want to kill them. So it's it's interesting looking at the book and seeing that perspective versus how they're trying to be humanized more in the film, and especially with Roy Batty, and especially with the ending and his, his, I guess, classic is a good way to say it, is his monologue at the very end. So what are your thoughts in terms of that about the replicant side of the house?
They're quite mean to JR in the book. Like, I think it's oh god, I'm gonna space. What's Roy's wife's name? It's kind of like Ingrid, but not Ingmar. Or what's her name? God damn it.
I think you're close, actually. I'll look it up real quick. But yeah, as opposed to like Zora was the character in the film, it was like Roy had a wife in the book. Yeah.
She's the only one that kind of like tells Pris to calm down, because Pris drops the facade like as soon as the other replicants show up, and she starts being a complete dick to like, go get me that TV. Like, I don't want to live with you. Like, do I have to live with this guy? Can I stay in this other apartment? And it's like, damn, dude, like he's trying to like be your friend, and he's lonely, and he's offered to like shelter you and like do what he can to protect you and hide you. And very different in the film, right? Where like you get the idea that Roy's a little bit like amused with the idea of Sebastian, like you can kind of see he gets a little impatient at times, but kind of plays the game. But Pris seems to really genuinely like Sebastian. She's a little kinder to him. She's obviously using him too, but like, she's not nearly as mean to Sebastian. I you get the impression that the replicants are running scared much more, I think, in the film too than they are like in the book. But I don't know. I like the film. I prefer the film portrayal of the replicants. They are way more. I root for them. I'll put it that way. Way more in the movie than I do in the book. So,
how about you, May?
So, like I said, this is a point of me feeling conflicted because they're much more human in the movie, but I almost like them better in the book just because it feels more consistent to me. Because you have, and I'm so sorry I'm blanking on her name, but the opera singer.
Zora in the movie or the book? Sorry.
In the movie. Sorry, no, okay, the book. I mean, in the movie, she's kind of a burlesque performer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She takes the pleasure from the serpent.
Oh, damn.
That's what they said. I'm quoting the film there. It's like Zuber or something in the book, right? The opera singer, but something like that. It's close.
But yeah, the opera singer in the book, like I loved her character quite a lot because she definitely seems kind of like the cleverest, I would say, of the Andes, as the replicants are called in the book. But she's still it's interesting that like she's definitely like the most clever and analytical, but she also seems to be the most invested in like human art and music and expression and genuinely taking part and enjoying those things. She's definitely doing it to a degree for safety because she thinks she's safer as a public figure, but I don't know. I just like felt like more of an ability to relate to her as an individual, given that she'd kind of carved out this really interesting life for herself as a runaway illegal android. And then
That's
as far as the trio that go hang out with JR, Pris is an asshole. But I actually love how Batty's wife kind of like chides her for that, because that's also a very empathetic response, and like the way it comes out maybe isn't super like human, but the idea of seeing another suffering and not just adjusting your behavior but trying to coach someone else to adjust their behavior, that feels very genuine and empathetic to me. So yeah, no, I think I do like the androids better in the book than the film, just because it felt like, again, to make it more theater friendly and relatable, they just kind of gone for trying to make them awkward one moment and then very human and emotional the next, in kind of a very like coin flip sort of way, which gets the message across. But I like the consistency that you see in the book.
I'd actually agree with you on that in terms of the characters. I think that the consistency for me made more sense, especially for the replica, or I should say the Andes in the book, versus the replicants in the film, because one of the things that I think I struggled with it more the first time I watched the film, and maybe I watched the one with his voiceover, but I can't remember. I have seen that one, but I think that for me it was Roy's sort of. I felt like Roy was a little all over the place, depending. I guess sort of. He's not the only one. I feel like Leon was a little bit too, although Leon was always a little jittery from the beginning, since he is the first replicant that we're shown, and he also has to escape because he's almost captured. But I feel like Roy just kind of has some sort of like schizophrenic sort of behavior going on, because at one point he'll like torture, this one guy that they're interrogating to try and get into Terrell's corporation by freezing him. But at the same time, he'll somehow see some sort of connection with Sebastian, or then he'll want to go and assault his creator toward the end of the film so violently, or then he'll turn around and give this beautiful soliloquy at the very end as he's dying. And it's like, you have definitely seen some things. You don't have to tell me that, but I like how you're telling me. But it's like, you've had a long, rough road. And so, and I think for me more, it was like, why did he let Deckard live? After he went through this whole theatrical performance and the animal noises that he makes, which I guess is another thing we didn't really necessarily tie in with the animals, but like his sort of animalistic attitude at the end, and one of the scenes where he basically does physical damage to himself in a very Christ-like way in the final cut, where he kind of gives himself stigmata, and then suddenly there's a dove that comes out of nowhere that symbolic, I guess, represents him becoming good and going to heaven. I mean, you can take that how you will. He must have
stolen like a magician's coat or something.
I know, yeah.
And for my there's just a spare dove in his pocket.
Yes, talking about what's real and what's not real in Blade Runner is like going to a magic show. Yeah, so it is. Yeah, it's so strange for me. At least it was initially. So that I think, from that perspective, that was when I read the book, I thought this makes more sense. This seems more fleshed out to me in terms of the plot, in terms of what's important with sort of the structure of society, and then in terms of the replicants and their consistency. But that actually ties into one trivia question that I've got for both of you. And it's a little bit, hopefully, I did my research correctly, but it's a little bit of a trick question. So at the very end, true or false, when Roy Batty gives his soliloquy, that was all made up on the spot by Rutger Hauer?
I feel like I've read this at some point. I know that he contributed to it, but I don't know how much. Like the same way that Robert Shaw like tweaked the Indianapolis speech in Jaws, like that was something that existed, but I don't fucking remember, man. I'm gonna say like he improvised the tears and rain line or something to that effect, but like maybe not the entire thing.
Okay.
I'm gonna say that they did multiple cuts and he improvised them, but only one of them made it to the final film. So true.
Okay. So the answer is false in the sense that, and there might be some we might let it slide for both, but he took what they had, which was a longer version of that, and he kept a certain, I guess he sort of said, hey, he pitched some ideas to it, and one of the comments that he made was, can I cut out here and then can I add in some stuff in sort of the middle? So he kept lines like certain things that he alludes to, like the C-beams, or about the one before it, I can't remember, but there's like the two
ships
main
on fire off the shoulder of Orion.
There you go. Yeah, man. So stuff like that, where it was like certain items were like the essence. There were certain bits that were still there, but then he emphasized the extra part around it. He cut a lot of it, and then he ended with the tears and rain. So I guess technically you're both partially right, so I could let it go. But yeah.
Yeah, you said it was a trick question. It's your fault. You should have just left it true or false.
I know. But see, I like to play it a little bit to see if you go for the bait or not. So yeah. But yeah, I actually really liked it. I thought that was cool. And I always think it's interesting when actors, like, you talk about Jaws, but I always think it's interesting when actors contribute something to the character that wasn't in the script and it just freaking nails it. You watch it and you think, yeah, this movie's got some weird stuff, but man, that was really good. And so if it had been a little bit more consistent, I think throughout, that probably would have had even more of an impact for me. But yeah, what's up?
I don't know what it's called, but there's a phenomenon that you see in films periodically where it's like the villain is getting to the point where it's like you empathize with him too much, so he has to commit some random act of violence
To pull the audience back.
to kind of like pull the audience away. That felt very true in the case of Roy Batty when he killed his creator. Because it's like up to that moment, I'm just like, I'm actually rooting for Roy Batty, and then he kills him. I'm like, oh, maybe not.
In a very Oedipal way too, you know.
Yeah.
Like there's like a weird stuff going on. I've always read that final scene is like he is sort of trying to teach Deckard a lesson about what it feels like, you know, to be afraid, to be hunted, right? It's almost an abbreviated version of his entire life, right? In a lot of ways. And then he is showing mercy to be like, hey, like maybe it's a little egotistical. Like I could just let you fall. I could lob you off I could have killed you 1,000 different ways by now. So I am superior because A, I'm showing mercy, and B, like I kicked your ass like several times in the last 5 minutes, like all the rest of us. That's the most Harrison Ford's ever got his ass kicked in a movie, by the way. I feel like he does not do a good job like at any point. Like
No.
That's always been my read though of it, is it's like, you know, it's a little bit of ego, but he's trying to teach a lesson to Harrison Ford.
Well, before we wrap up, because I think we're probably at that point now in the film itself and also in our podcast on it, I would like to throw out a little shout out to the title of the film. Since the original novel was Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? And the title obviously got changed to Blade Runner. I always thought it was interesting that the reason that they chose that was it was a title from another story that was adapted called, it was called The Blade Runner. And it was by, and I'll find his name here in my notes if I look close enough, but I want to say it was Alan Norse, who actually was a physician and a science fiction author. So I thought that was pretty cool. But apparently his novel was also dystopian, and it dealt with a bunch of, in the future, it's sort of the concept that if you ever become sick, you are sort of excluded from reproducing. Like it's another one of those, we don't want anybody who's going to spread any disease, and this planet's already way overpopulated. And so if you ever become sick, you're sort of weeded out and submitted for sterilization by the government. And so in order to try and survive, you have some empathetic doctors out there who will hire on what they call Blade Runners, that are basically like the young, the quick young folks that want to go out there and fence pills, syringes, scalpels, anything they can find to help these doctors out for treating people who may not necessarily want to be found out as being sick. And so if you want to read a little bit more about that, there's a good article on theverge.com that kind of goes through the details on there. But I would actually like to see that as a film. I think that would be cool. And also just the title makes a whole lot more sense to me, because although Blade Runner itself sounds like a badass name for a job description, I'm like, okay. Like you said, May, there's a lot of running, but there sure as shit aren't a lot of blades in this movie.
No blades. Come on.
There's a lot more blades in the sequel dealing with love than there are in the character love, I should say, for anyone listening, than there are with Deckard. So there's that.
Yeah.
But if they make that film, they have to call it Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. It's only fair. Like
I know, yeah. Turn the tables.
People are gonna be like, huh?
The fuck is this? Yep. Oh man. But still, excellent. Well, before we wrap up entirely, I guess the question does come down to, do we think the book or the movie is better? I'll let you guys go first, and then I'll wrap up at the end. Just to give you some feedback in case it helps for your determination. What I was looking at mostly for comparison was I looked at the plot overall, the characters, which we talked a lot about, the overall message of what we thought the book or the movie might be about, and whether you preferred one or the other, and just sort of the style as well. So whether we're talking the chiaroscuro that we've hampered on a couple of times, or just anything really stylistically about either. But I will turn it over to both of you for whoever would like to go first.
So like I feel like most listeners getting to this point will know that I'm going to go for the book, but I will explain myself. To the film's credit, it did in a lot of ways establish / reinforce the cyberpunk aesthetic. And I absolutely love the score and cinematography in that film. Like it was eye candy, especially watching like the I guess either restored or HD version that was on Netflix. And it was really cool just to like see all the model work. I really love physical models, and of course I did that in the sequel film 2049 as well, which was a great homage to the first film and made it feel more real. But yeah, I loved everything that went into like the visuals and the music and even the character design and costuming. Like I want to give that a shout out as well. Each one of Rachel's outfits like made me gasp. They were great. And the film like nailed all of that, and it's hard to compare that to like book descriptions. I will say that the descriptions fell flat in comparison, and that if I experienced them in a reverse order, if I'd read the book and then watched the film, I think I would have had a much less or a much harder time kind of visualizing what was going on in the book without having the movie visuals in my head already. So that is a place where the movie is very strong and definitely deserves its place as a sci-fi classic. However, I do prefer the book, and that is because of the characters as well as the plot. I feel like the plot is very like clean and tight in the book. There is kind of like a little bit of a weird epilogue feel to the last chapter that I don't love, but by and large, everything makes sense. It follows like a very like clean, concise, chronological formula. I'm not really like questioning anyone's motives. Whereas in the film, there were definitely times where I was confused, like why certain things are happening. As we talked about, the white comp test didn't make a ton of sense to the questions until you actually read the book and get that out of context. And there are other things going on with the replicants and the added kind of erraticness of them that we discussed, where they're not necessarily behaving in a manner that seems like robotic and rational, but also not like humanly emotional. And it doesn't make a ton of sense, especially with Roy Batty towards the end. As much as I do love that final monologue. And then yeah, just with the characters, like I mentioned, Erin is such a beautiful character in the sense that she is a perfect foil to Deckard. I'm really glad that she was in it. And she seems to be, rather than kind of having a brave face and just getting on with life in this dystopia, like willing to push back a bit and kind of lull in the sadness and loss of this world that I like. And I also really like the opera singer whose name I'm still forgetting, her character, but
it's like Luba Zuba or something like that.
Yeah. Her character is great, and like I said, I think it brought a lot of dimensionality to the androids, and I liked the burlesque Python dancer in the film as well, but she definitely didn't get to say as much. The whole scene was basically just Deckard being pervy towards her. So
his accent. Have you thought yourself to be exploited? I love it's so bizarre, man. By the way, that's Dolores from Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
What? Really?
The love interest of Eddie Valentine. Yeah.
Damn. Nice. Okay. Well, anyway, so she was good, but I really love the opera singer's character. And yeah, I'm just gonna have to go with the book. And also, like, I've been a lifelong fan of sci-fi novels. I love Frank Herbert and all of them, and it definitely like fits very well into that canon in terms of kind of exploring a new world. And I also love stories that have generally a cast of unlikable characters.
Nice.
So that didn't dissuade me from the book at all.
Excellent. Oh man. All right, Chris. I know you, and I only say this because I've known you for a while and you've always talked about the film, but I make no judgment calls. So over to you, buddy.
No, I mean, you know what I'm saying. Like, I mean, this is in my top 5 favorite films ever, and it's my favorite sci-fi film.
Mhm.
It wasn't always so. Like it took me a while to like warm up to this. I obviously struck immediately by like the atmosphere of it. The more I watch this movie, like it's one of those like films that makes it so high up on my list because I do get something new every time. I pick up on some little either like production detail or like some nuance like in some of the acting. I actually really prefer the androids and how they're portrayed in the film, specifically because like they are developing emotions, and I've always liked that aspect, right? They make the whole comment of the reason they have the lifespan is like they don't want them to get too emotionally intelligent. So I've always kind of read it as like they're almost like toddlers that are not really understanding how they're feeling. They have sort of impulses, right? And they're acting on impulses, and I like that a lot. And I find the character of Batty to be just like comical in some scenes, like when he's got the little like eggs and stuff. Like he's playful in a way that like in the book, like he's I don't know, like I prefer that, like that iteration. Like for me it just works a little better. I do think it's a piss poor adaptation of the book in a lot of ways. Like I do think there was a lot left on the table that was interesting in the book. All of that being said, I do tend to think that Philip K. Dick books are notoriously hard to adapt, and it seems like that is kind of the trend, as they take what the writer, the screenwriter or director finds to be the most interesting bits, and then like everything else goes by the wayside, right? Like if you look at like Minority Report or Total Recall, they're very, very, very few things that make it over that are really interesting in the book, and that might be because it's kind of hard. Like, but I think this one you could almost do like another adaptation, and it would not feel like Blade Runner. You could do another version of this, have it closer to the book, and it'd be very interesting. So it's not to knock the book, but yeah, I'm firmly in the camp of the movie. It's a very special like film for me. I write to that score for both 2049 and Blade Runner. Like I can throw that on.
It's gorgeous.
And yeah, just like it's one of those instances where everything just comes together beautifully for me. I do think, oddly enough, Harrison Ford's the least interesting thing, like, despite have sort of top billing, and like, and that's not a knock against his acting. It's just I don't feel like the character of Deckard is really particularly like interesting, nor is that performance particularly transformative. It's everything. He's got a lot of support kind of holding him up, scene to scene. So I will say like that's been kind of a consistent criticism of mine towards the film, but it doesn't end up really mattering for me. I'm like, yeah, I still want this movie like with all my heart. So that's my final answer.
Lock it in.
All
right. Well, and for me as well, I will start by saying the film itself is gorgeous, and the sequel, when I mean, this is going to be tangential, but when I watched 2049 after having watched Arrival, and then I heard that Villeneuve was going to do Dune, I thought he's going to nail it. Yeah, I don't even have to worry about that, because I felt like watching this film, he got it. He got what the look was going to be and what the feel had to be. And I felt like I hadn't watched Blade Runner in a long time, and I thought I'm back in that world. I mean, the score was phenomenal. I mean, it's Hans Zimmer, so also it's sort of like once you hear his name attached to a project, you're like, whatever it is, I'll watch it or I'll listen to it and I'll love it. But the music is, it's very important. Actually, it's interesting. You made the point too earlier about sort of whether you hear the saxophone or you hear something that is trying to mimic the saxophone. And I think a lot of that sort of synthetic music is important, because it is a question of what's real and what's not real, what is, or in this world that we're in. And it's all very much in the 2049, it's very classic Zimmer, where it's just hammering at you, shaking your bones while you're watching these, like, and it could be a slow motion scene, but you are hammered by whatever this epic score is going to be. But even in the first one too, it has a very distinct, like at the very end or the very beginning, when it's, they'll start a note and it'll just sort of like go down at the very end when it trills. And so it's beautiful. But I could talk way too long about film or about music for that to be relevant. So I will step back a bit. I will say that for me, it was the book as well that I liked more. for a combination of factors. I thought the plot was more interesting in the book in terms of the religious aspect that was thrown in there too, about how society was, about the importance of animals, and just sort of how all the characters tied in together. There is a very strange, and I'm assuming very symbolic end to that book in terms of where there is sort of this apparition that Deckard sees of Wilbur Mercer helping him, and then sort of a whole deconstruction about Mercerism by Mercer. And you can take a lot away from that how you wish, and that's a whole other conversation, I feel like, as well. But I think it's worth the read because it's
Just
interesting.
Wanted some whiskey,
and
man. That's all I wanted.
Yeah. It's right. And it throws a curveball, and it's very, I would say, kind of classic Dick in the sense that it is, you thought you knew what was going on to a certain point, and then it's like, no, not entirely. So I don't know, it's sort of it just adds to it a little bit more, adds another layer to what is real and what's not. And so I enjoyed that part. I like the characters a lot more in the book, whether they're terrible people or not. And I thought it was more consistent with the Andes in the book versus the replicants in the film. But I also like the message too. I thought it was interesting in terms of what makes you real. I felt bad because in the book, I think the replicants or the Andes really get shafted, because I would have liked to have seen more emotional sort of a take on them in the book than in the film. So I will agree with you. They are by far the more interesting characters in the film by a long shot. So it's too bad. It's sort of like if you could have a little bit of both and make that into one thing, I think that could be really beautiful. I will say as well for the film, the style, I mean, I'm a big fan of models too. All the old sci-fi, I think, looks way more realistic when they use at least a model base for it. No, it's a good point. I mean, I love all the prosthetic stuff they used to do in sci-fi. So yeah, even just the matte paintings and stuff versus like all the CGI, there's something about it. I don't know if it's the nostalgia factor, but I think it looks more real to me. It was a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed it too. It was a lot of fun to go back and rewatch this film, to talk about different versions of the film, and to talk about the book that it is based on. Regardless of the shortcomings of its author and his personal life, as well as perhaps the shortcomings of our protagonist in the film and his rapey behavior, which is definitely a no-no. How he had a child, we'll leave it up to that. But I guess is now the question of what our next side quest / also choice for a movie will be for the coming week. So Chris, I'm going to turn it back over to you, sir.
Yeah, we could draw our card before we play another round of keyword countdown for sure. That way, we can end with some fun. No, it's all good, man. All right, let's see what our next film for our main quest is going to be. This is like, I'm not going to lie, like one of my favorite parts of the episode when we do this. It's so satisfying, and like there's a little bit of suspense. It's great.
The deck is rigged.
All right, so
only if he draws my name.
We are going to do a camp or cringe. And the description of that for our audience members is: cheesy movies. You love them, you hate them, you love to hate them. Discuss a notorious film and why it's considered cringe or camp. And this is going to be a May film, Two of a Kind from 1983. A film I've not seen, and I purposely didn't look up. I was like, some of these films that, especially the ones I'm like, I've never heard of, I want to go in blind and just experience it in its purest form. So
I found out about this. Yeah, I found out about this film because of a YouTube channel called Pushing Up Roses. Shout out to her, because she talked about it, and it is possibly the worst rom-com ever filmed.
Oh, sweet.
That's saying a lot.
Sounds like might be another watch party time.
I think so.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so that's going to be our next film for those of you watching and following along. Two of a Kind from 1983. So very excited for that. And to close out the episode, May has prepared another round of keyword countdown. Thanks again, as always, to Mr. Gavin Murphy of RKG Video, who has given his blessing for us to occasionally play this on the show. You should check out that channel. They do amazing work. They most recently made a series called Three Ways, which is them trying to do the same task in a video game in their own kind of personality style. And it is 6 missions of Hitman. And it's quite funny to see how they all approach those tasks differently. So highly recommend that channel. May, take it away. Show us what you got here.
All right, boys. So you know the name of the game, but for your first movie, your first keyword, I will go through 10 total and you will gain points as you go. So like if you guess on the first one, you get a bunch of points. If you don't guess till I give you like the last keyword, well, then you just get 1 point, etc. I'll keep a tally as we go. But yeah, for our first film, your keyword is desert, as in like a sandy desert, not dessert.
Dune.
Lawrence of Arabia.
Star Wars. A New Hope.
Not Star.
Lawrence of Arabia.
It is not Lawrence of Arabia.
All right.
I can only do 2, right?
You can do a couple. I mean, yeah.
If I could do more than 2, The Mummy.
It is not The Mummy. Although now I'm wishing I had put that one on here. All right. Your second keyword is dream. So we have desert and dream.
How's this not Dune? Come on. Dream. Wayne's World 2?
No.
That would have been amazing.
With the Native American, like with his butt.
Any ideas, Will?
Cowboys and aliens.
No. All right. Your third keyword is neo-western. So we have desert, dream, neo-western.
Brokeback Mountain?
No.
No Country for Old Men?
Ooh.
Hey.
Yes.
Got it.
Noise.
I'm impressed.
That is good.
The speech at the end is where the dream factors in, where he talks about the dream that he has. And the last line is, and then I woke up. Yeah. Love it.
Yeah.
All right. Chris is in the lead with 8 points. Okay.
Cha-ching.
For our next film, our first keyword is opera singer.
Blade Runner. No.
It's not Blade Runner.
Fifth Element.
Ooh.
Jesus Christ.
Did you get it? That is awesome. Oh, the best sci-fi opera scene ever. I have to say, I was amazed that they could actually that was real. Like that was like a real voice and not synthesized. So
I'm gonna say that I drew on my knowledge of the fact that you like sci-fi for that one. So I was like sci-fi opera singer. So it's a little bit of like deduction, but
fair. All right. Well, be ready to respond on this next one. Gotta beat Chris to the buzzer.
Whatever you do, just start naming science fiction films.
Okay. Your first keyword is watching a kung fu movie.
Kill Bill.
True Romance.
No.
Office Space.
Ding. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, son of a bitch. That's
All
two
right.
tenors right there. That's awesome.
It is. Yeah, let's do scores. All right. So Chris is in the lead with 18, but Will is coming for him at 10.
That's right, baby.
Oh man. All right. I think this will be a little bit harder for you guys. Your first keyword is new kid in school.
Mean Girls.
No.
So close. So many.
Karate Kid?
No.
Yeah, I'm gonna wait for the next.
All right. Your second keyword is teen angst. So new kid in school and teen angst.
Oh, I feel like I have to like go back to like 80s films for this somehow.
Yeah, 90s too. Like,
Yeah.
Donnie Darko?
No.
Oh, that's a good guess. I would think.
It is.
Yeah, because Gretchen, right? She's the new kid, but yeah.
All right. Ready?
Yes.
Your next keyword is black comedy. So you have new kid in school, teen angst, and black comedy.
Idle Hands?
No.
Damn it.
I'm still gonna wait for another clue.
I feel like it's on the tip of my brain, but go ahead.
All right. So your next keyword is female protagonist. So you have new kid in school, teen angst, black comedy, female protagonist.
Clueless?
No.
That's not really a black comedy, I guess. It's more just straight comedy, but
All right. Your next keyword is character names as title.
Jennifer's Body?
No.
That's not a black comedy.
I've never seen it, so yeah, I'm like,
So new kid in school, teen angst, black comedy, female protagonist, and character name is title.
I want to, yeah. Truthfully, I wanted to say Drumline, but that wouldn't work now with the. Gosh,
yeah,
man.
Bring It On with the titular "Bring It On."
Bring It On, yeah.
No.
Yeah.
All right, this
nothing.
next keyword might help a bit. Are you ready?
Yeah,
we need it. Yeah.
Right. New kid in school, teen angst, black comedy, female protagonist, character name and title. Click.
Fuck. I feel like there's something very obvious that I'm missing.
I know. Like,
I'm
we're
mad
gonna feel
at.
like assholes. Like, these guys couldn't come up with this film.
The next one will be very obvious. So let me know if you want it.
I'm ready.
Give me 10 seconds. No.
Okay. Your next keyword is killing spree.
Oh,
So
Carrie.
No.
What? It's not really a comedy either. Jeez.
You have new kid in school, teen angst, black comedy, female protagonist, character name as title. Click killing spree.
What?
I'm embarrassed to say I do not know.
I'm not sure if you guys are going to get this one, but I'll keep going. Your next keyword is dynamite.
What the fuck is this?
I feel like this is the next film we need to add to the list.
Yeah, no shit. Dynamite, killing spree, new kid. No, I got nothing.
This is
Okay,
painful.
Your next keyword, your second to last keyword is
there's
spaghetti.
more. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to list out all the keywords, including the final one. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Yes.
New kid in school, teen angst, black comedy, female protagonist, character name is title, click, killing spree, dynamite, spaghetti, serial killer as protagonist.
Just end the suffering for us now, please.
Have you heard of a film called Heathers?
Yep,
Oh.
but I'd never seen it.
No.
I didn't know that was the case.
Yeah.
So that's
It's wild.
awesome.
Like, you need to watch it.
I'm
Isn't that,
making a note
is that
right
Winona
now.
Ryder's in there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Damn it.
Oh,
Yeah, no, I
what?
didn't know the plot. So
It's a famous film. You were right when you said 80s. I think it did come out in the 80s at least.
yeah.
Nice.
nailed
My
that, Will.
spidey sense was tingling for a reason.
Yep.
Cool.
Good pick. Yeah. You stumped us on
Damn.
one. That's always a good thing.
Yeah.
All
awesome.
right. All right. Last one. Are you guys ready?
Yep.
So
Baby.
we have Chris at 18, Will at 10. Your first keyword is underwater scene.
Underwater.
The Abyss.
No, and no.
Both are great
Titanic.
films.
No.
Lots of underwater there, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Oof.
Royal
Your-
Tenenbaums.
No.
Because he loves his underwater shit.
Yeah.
All right.
Your next keyword is lab. So we have
Shape of
underwater
Water?
scene and lab. Ding, 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 ding.
Hey.
Oh, what'd you say?
Shape of Water.
Nice.
Nice.
And you know what? I
Alright.
would not have gotten that because I don't think I've seen that film. So
Really?
Shocking. I know.
It's good. It's
I
solid.
know.
I didn't love it as
I
much
watched-
as-
I watched it on a plane next to my mom, which was a very awkward choice.
Ooh.
Yeah, there's some spicy bits in there for sure.
Did they leave the spicy bits in for the plane flight?
Yeah.
Because I
Yeah.
think sometimes they edit like films out sometimes.
They do.
Yep.
They did not in this case.
Oh, okay.
I think with
yeah.
seatback stuff,
Sorry.
and because like the screens are kind of like obscured from like unless you're like straight
Ah.
on, like
Yeah.
there's a little disclaimer that plays before them, but yeah.
I missed it.
Yep. Yes. Well, sorry. It's
Yeah.
okay. That's
But yeah, congrats, Chris. You won
Thank you.
keyword
Nice.
contest.
Yeah.
Woo!
nice job.
Great job, Will. I am still impressed that you got Office Space that quickly.
Me too.
Nice.
I wasn't even near that in my brain, so yeah, that's awesome.
All
Cool.
right. Good work, guys.
Well, that about wraps her up. So we will all see you next week. Thank you for hanging out, listening. Please do give us a like, a share, subscribe, a comment. Any kind of interaction really does help the show, especially that share part. So if you feel inclined to let people know, we would greatly appreciate it. Until next week, we love you. Bye.
Bye, guys.